lots of people talk about being nice and being kind, and that particularly as culture has evolved in a positive way, it's become acceptable to be vulnerable, etc. Kindness is important, but I think it's not kind to someone to keep someone in the organisation, which means the organisation can't perform as well as it ought to. It's not kind to not tell people what you think of them, even if it means a difficult conversation, because if you're that person, you want to know. You don't want to not know, because then you can't do anything about it. That's actually unkind. So I think kind of understanding what kindness to a person really means and really having their interests at heart, I think can enable us to put ourselves into uncomfortable positions more easily, maybe.
Hello and welcome to the Courageous Leaders podcast. I'm Joanna Howes, your host and founder of The Change Creators. We focus on helping leadership teams build trust, alignment and cohesion to win together. On today's episode, I am very excited as we are joined by Xavier Rees. Xav is the Group CEO at AMV BBDO and is a transformative leader known for driving growth, championing exclusivity and steering some of the industry's most celebrated agencies. So let's get started. Xav, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for giving me your time.
And thank you for having me. It's a total pleasure and privilege.
It is, isn't it?
Exciting.
Quite fun. Are you ready?
No, I don't think I'm ever ready for these things, but
Straight in though, what has been a courageous moment for you?
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier, weren't we? I think deciding to leave Havas, where I'd had such an important part of my career and enjoyed it and built an amazing agency and team of people. I felt safe and trusted, and to decide to throw all that away and go start somewhere where I didn't know anybody. I think that was I don't know, is that bold or courageous? I don't know, but it felt a big deal. It's probably the best thing I could say.
So I need to ask why.
Why? I set out to try and achieve some things, most of which I'd achieved. And you also realise the bits you hadn't achieved, probably I'm not going to achieve there. I think, like all organisations, the people around you move and change. And I think, I'd sort of really signed up to a group that didn't quite exist any longer. I'm reasonably driven by my values, if you like, and like there are in all jobs, but there were some moments that where I worried my values weren't totally aligned with the organisation I was with now. But I wouldn't want to say that was the leading thing. I think one of the reasons it's a big deal is because I wasn't running away from anything. It was more about there was something I wanted to run towards. But when there's something exciting there and you feel like you want to go there, you start to question, are you mad? Are you mad? Is the right thing to do? A lot of your survival instincts kick in almost an avoidance of risk way. I think as humans we're programmed to avoid risk and only take it when our lives are at stake, almost biologically. So to take that risk, it felt like a big deal at the time. I mean, I could have answered that question in loads of ways, but here we are. I'm giving you that answer.
We'll take it. Were your peers surprised with your move?
In the industry? Yeah, I think.
Because you were so established.
Yeah, there are some people that have been in organisations much longer than I'd been at Havas, but it's the longest I'd been anywhere. I was 8 years there in the end, and maybe not in my mind, but I think to lots of other people, Havas and I become synonymous, and so I got a lot of that. People would say, God, I thought you'd never leave. You and Havas, we thought about it in the same breath always. So I think they were surprised, and as was I in a way.
I was when I saw the news, I have to say.
So yeah, but like I say, I was running towards something, and there probably were only a couple of things I would have left Havas for, and AMV was the thing.
Do you know what those things were you were looking for, or was it more just instinctively you felt you were ready to grow?
By accident, and I think what happened at Havas was we took the agency. And by the way, this wasn't all about me. I had an amazing team of people, and my job was really to just make that work. and lead the team from from where we were to where we got to. But I change and taking a company or a team on that journey, and maybe against the odds. I quite like proving people wrong. Quite like I don't like going in and making a 0.05% of difference. I'm much more into if I'm gonna do something, let's make a significant difference. And I felt the AMV thing. I mean, AMV is an incredible agency with an amazing reputation, but the chance to return it to or surpass what it's achieved in the past was quite exciting and quite different from the task I had engaged in at Havas.
Do you like a challenge?
I think we all do, don't we? I mean, I'm not one of those people that sort of likes a comfortable life. I mean, in some ways, I'm a bit dysfunctional like that. But I think, look, the world is full of those people, and I think our industry is full of them. I kind of, I've luckily found a job where it's almost a professional requirement to have a short attention span. So I think change and a challenge, and it's weird because I spent so much of my career proving people wrong. I don't think, myself included, I don't think I ever thought I'd be the CEO of an agency. And then suddenly I was, and everybody, thought I wasn't doing a bad job at it. So actually, it's quite interesting how suddenly there are fewer people to prove wrong. I think I've put myself back in a position. I've probably taken some of that safety away from myself, which I've not really thought about until I'm sitting in a chair now, but that's probably part of it in a way.
So where did that needing to prove people wrong come from? From
my earlier life. I was, at school, I was not seen as a high, I think I was not seen as a high achiever. I was always seen as someone with lots of potential, but my school reports were all about if only he actually knuckled down and realised his potential. But I think I decided that I had a better chance of standing out if I mucked around in school than tried to take everybody on at the academic game, which I probably wouldn't have won at. I always wanted to stand out, I think. So I think I was at a school where lots of high performing kids, where sport was really important. I was good at sport. I was good at cross country running. It's fun. The cup cross country running was the tiniest cup in the world. It was like the tiniest cup in the world.
They're so proud.
The rugby and football cups were these enormous cups, and so like literally anything I did was I always sort of told myself it. I think there were lots of signals telling me that the things I was achieving were not as good or important. So yeah.
So that proves that I can do this. Because I know you're sort of, you said that you never thought you'd be a CEO. And when we spoke, you said a bit about, you weren't somebody you thought could be a typical leader for maybe some of the leaders you were having. So what's that journey in terms of then you believing that you could become the CEO?
Well, I didn't ever say I didn't think I could do it.
Okay.
Which is important, and this is an interesting thing, right? Because I don't think because I hear people talk about imposter syndrome. Actually, maybe a lot of, maybe if I go back to that story earlier in life, I often think people didn't see what I really had in me, or what I was capable of, or that I had a brain, or any of those things. So maybe that's what I was trying to prove to people. I think I never thought I'd be I suppose at first you don't. You look at, there's not many people in those roles. And when you're sitting as a little account exec or, marketing exec in a client or agency role, you just, I did think I would get there. There came a point relatively early in my career, I thought if one day I'd really like to be the MD of an agency. I don't know whether that was because that was just one-off being the CEO. I felt that was a safe sort of objective to set. But also the people in those roles were just not like me. I didn't, when I say not like me, look, I'm a, reasonably well-educated, white, middle-class bloke in an advertising agency. So, I wasn't short of role models in that sense. But, I'm not sort of super alpha, very assertive, good at conflict, all of those things. So, and I looked around me, and it was a very macho world, 1990s advertising, where that kind of leadership was not just seen as aspirational, it was sort of role modelled as the only way of doing things. And weakness and strength were really sort of common words, but they were defined in how you asserted yourself on other people. So yeah, I just didn't see myself in those roles. But as I got more experienced, I definitely realised I understood the business, and I thought I might have I always thought I had what it took to do the next role. So as I would get promoted or find have a new boss or whatever, I'd always think, well, I think I could do what they did. I just think over time I realised I didn't need to do it like them. I think for a period I thought I had to do the job like my bosses were doing their jobs, rather than I would need to carry out that role, but I could do it in whichever way I wanted to.
Were you kind of MD before you got to CEO?
So I was never an MD. I was
Look
a
at
deputy
that,
MD. I was a deputy MD and then a group MD.
Just the MD.
Never just a plain old MD. One day, you never know, it might happen. But no, actually, weirdly. So, and then I went from being group MD to CEO. I mean, I'd been department head and all of that kind of thing. And I was managing partner of an account that had, essentially was a small agency, 70 people. So I was used to leadership and running P&Ls and so on and so forth. But no, I was never an MD. It's a very good point.
Missed that bit.
Yeah.
We'll go back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when was it? What position did you feel you got to when you suddenly went, do you know what? I'm just going to lead as me, and I'm really comfortable doing it in your style.
Well, I did that deputy MD role I took, and I sort of apologise if people listening have heard this story before, but I had an amazing boss who, when I first started the agency was called Claydon Healy, and the guys that my boss is called Mike Welsh, and I didn't have a great first few weeks, and he we were pitching for something, and the pitch meeting, I mean, nobody did well in the pitch meeting, but me included, and we didn't win the pitch, and I thought I'd got away with it. A few weeks later, he said to me, how did you think that went? I was like, oh, damn, Mike sussed me out. And he just really clearly said, I don't know, you're just pretending to be someone you're not in there. I didn't hire that person, I hired you. And then he started describing me. But he wasn't describing the skills I had. He was describing the way I went about stuff and my attitude to life and how I communicate. All these things that had never been really pointed out to me as strengths or weaknesses, that because I was always judged against a set of criteria for how you did a role, and they were quite fixed. And then he said, just be you. And I thought, oh my God, he's actually hired me because of me. And it was just an enormously liberating experience. I stopped trying to be somebody else. I think until that point, I spent my whole life trying to either be like my bosses or to second. I spent a lot of time second guessing, which is exhausting, and also because you're then not in control of that other person you're trying to second guess, if that person even exists. It's hard. It's hard enough doing well at being yourself. So,
who am I?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a real. So I wouldn't say that it happened overnight. That was a pivotal moment because it enabled me to start reflecting on who I was, and on what the best things about me were. And then something that happened around about that time as well is I got some advice about, you don't need to be brilliant at everything, but you do need to know, so we almost sorted stuff out into boxes. Here's the stuff you're really good at and just keep doing that people really value you for. Here's the stuff you're shit at, and it doesn't matter as long as you find someone in your team that's good at it. And here's the stuff you're shit at, and if you don't get good at it, you won't get any further. And that's a really interesting lesson, because there's some stuff, you don't need a team full of people like you. In fact, the opposite. You need a team full of people that complement you. So working out what you're good at, and then realising you don't need to be good at everything, but probably there are some things you're a bit shit at that you do need to get much better at. That was a key period in my career, definitely.
What wonderful advice! Like to have people that took the time, to that just invest in you to help you. Because they could. And I think I suppose what's nice for you, they saw you.
Yes.
And I was guessing with all that need of wanting to prove yourself, prove things, that you finally were seen.
Yeah.
You can just like let the mask go and be. Because I remember it's just kind of, I never knew how to be the other person. So I was just hiding meetings. It's like I found it very difficult to emulate because for me, the women I saw, they were really aggressive, shoulder pads. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. So I'll just be really quiet. So I then retreated. And so the minute it was like, oh, I can be me. This is really nice. And you can lead if you're just a bit quieter or a bit shy or a bit more introverted. That's absolutely normal. And it's actually something I've posted on LinkedIn today. It's not about what you do. It's about who you're being and who you become. And I think that's what, as you say, I think skills you can learn. But character, I think character is everything in leadership. And staying true to your character.
Yeah, and attitude as well. Sort of understanding that, like, it's actually really hard to shape attitude. You like that. Like I say, I've already mentioned it, but that phrase, hire for attitude, train for skill. It's very difficult to change people's attitude, but actually you can teach lots of people new skills. So yeah, working out what, and I often in interviews ask the question, how would you describe your personal style, the way you go about your job? And it throws a lot of people because I think we haven't been taught that there's a million ways of doing everything. You get taught that there's a way of doing stuff. Of course, there's loads of ways of doing stuff.
I think that's loads. I was about to ask you, how has that now shaped your leadership in terms of like when you recognise people in your team that are doing a role they think they're doing it, but they're not being true to themselves? Can you notice that now? And do you pass on the same advice?
Yeah, I do. I also think people are all at different stages in that journey. Maybe at that point in time I was ready to acknowledge who I was. Maybe sooner I wasn't. I don't know. So yes, I do. I think it's really important that people feel that you think the way, if you think someone's good, make sure they know that you think it's because of them, not because they're carrying out a set of behaviours or actions that are appropriate for that role. So I definitely try to make sure that people understand it's them that I'm into. But equally, there are some people that I've managed who aren't ready to have that conversation or aren't ready to be themselves, who aren't comfortable in their own skin, seriously. And you can tell that, but there's only so much you can do about it.
If you're enjoying this episode and finding it insightful, I want to take a moment and remind you, if you haven't already, to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action, but it makes a big difference. Not only will you be the first to know when an episode drops, but it really helps us to continue to create this content for leaders like you. And I'd love to hear from you. So if you've got thoughts, questions, or ideas, feel free to drop them in the comments. Also, if you want to explore how my leadership training and coaching can support you and your team, then drop me a DM and we can have a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode. Changing tack slightly, moving on from, so you left Havas. How much time did you have in between of joining?
Somewhere between 4.5 and 5 months, I think. Yeah.
So initially I go, nice.
Yeah,
How
it was nice. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was good.
Just had that
Definitely good to get some time out.
So I'd love to know the insights of having such a break, because that is quite a break, to then walking into AMV. And I'm right, you didn't know anyone at AMV?
No, I mean, like I'd obviously met a few people during the process, but actually, no, I knew virtually no one there.
Which, how unusual is that in this industry?
It is. I mean, it's partly because AMV's been so good at holding on to talent, but lots of people have been there a long time, and therefore they've not been other places, let alone where I'd been. But yeah, it is unusual. So yeah, almost nobody, which is quite scary.
That's what I want to know. What was that like? It's like leaving somewhere you're really safe, coming out of the industry for a bit, and then joining somewhere as CEO with big expectations, everyone looking at you and not knowing anyone. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, being off was great. I think I'm one of those people that, I think it's important to work to live, or you want to, I'm working to earn money to have a good life. And I've learned that I can, you can give back through the work you do as well. But rather than work being my, everything to me. I think my family might disagree because, it's always hard to get the balance right. But given I do this for a living, I wouldn't rather do anything else. But I think, so being off was amazing. And And I was quite structured. I sort of broke it up into a beginning, middle, and end. And I met up with people a couple of days a week to make sort of loosely work related stuff, so that I kept my brain functioning. And then about a week before I went back to work, I remember thinking, I've messed this gardening leave thing up because I haven't relaxed enough, still feel a bit stressed out. And then about 3 weeks into being at AMV, I remember thinking, you relaxed all right, mate. It's like, it hit me like a train. So I think a few things I learned. I learned that our jobs take a lot out of us. I learned that I'm actually a big believer in looking after ourselves as leaders in the workplace, and carving out time to look after ourselves. But I was quite staggered by how much more exercise I was getting, how much more I was moving just naturally when I was not working, and how much more sleep I was getting, all kinds of things. And then when I came back to work, it took me several months to get back to the place where I was able to compartmentalise all the things that we deal with on a daily basis that can become quite stressful. So at the first, it's really basic stuff like as in very, very hygiene stuff, like the stress of working out what the quickest way from the tube is, the stress of where do I go to get lunch, stress of I think I know who to speak to about that thing now, but I've no idea where they sit. So there's some really basic stuff, but it still takes you a good month or more to work it all out. But then just the sheer pace and the decisions you have to make, and if you can carry a lot of emotion and stress in those decisions, and that's not healthy. And so I think it probably took me 3-4 months to get to a place where a lot of that stuff was back in my subconscious, and I was able to really perform happily. And the truth of it is, it's only really coming back after Christmas that I feel, right, I can absolutely perform at my very best now. Now, probably mad saying this, probably some of my bosses are looking at me going, well, hold on a second, like, what were you doing for your first 9 months? But I think I was doing an excellent job, but I think I'll do an even more excellent job this year.
You rescued yourself.
So there's all of that. And then, of course, stepping into an organisation where you don't know anybody, I think also is an age thing, right? I'm sort of unashamed that I'm in my early 50s now. And I think you over time you do get, you sort of learn to just put as much in your subconscious as possible. Having to start all over again is hard. And also, to your point, lots of people are looking at AMV and going, well, the number of messages I got, because there's so much goodwill in the industry for AMV. But I think earlier in my career, I would have found that quite a burden. I haven't found it a burden. I've found it quite motivating. But coming back into it and dealing with that and not knowing anyone, it did take me a bit of time. But you know what? I have to say, every single person at AMV has made that the easiest journey it could have been. That's all on me. I could not have wished for a more talented, welcoming, helpful crew to have got involved with, and they've made it way easier than it could have been.
Yeah, it's nice. It sounds like it must have been a little bit disorientating, a bit frustrating at times probably, but needing a lot of just kindness to yourself that actually, this is okay, I'll get my pace back, don't beat myself up for not being there.
And I think, weirdly, one of the things, byproducts of being somewhere a long time is, I don't think you lose, I don't know whether you lose confidence, but actually it's some of those big changes that we were trying to make. I was on show again and I had no one, I didn't have any safety net. So it can be, it is deeply unnerving, and you have to question, it makes you really question whether you've got it in you, whether you're capable, but also whether you've got, because it takes a lot of energy, huge amount of energy. So have you got the energy? But, the task is one that I've just got so much energy for. And I think weirdly, that's what's been the remaking of me is going somewhere where, the agency and what we can all do together
is so motivating. I'm just so full of energy.
Just reignited you.
My wife's like, why don't you need more sleep? Why do you get up so early? I'm just like, I've got something to.
We've got
do
purpose,
here.
isn't there? There's a real purpose and mission, and
and I want to do it for every single, like we all want to do it at AMV, but I feel a real debt to everyone in the agency to really try and do something amazing together.
So going in as CEO, whether you know anyone or not, what would you say if we've got some CEOs listening now and you're joining a new agency, and I said there's big expectations, how do you approach that? As you reflect on your time, what's your strategy to give yourself a good setup?
What I did is a lot of listening. I've always been a fan of doing a lot of listening. It's funny because, when I went into Havas first time, I'm always a big fan of finding some book that's going to help me navigate it. And then you realise, sort of about a month in, you go, oh, and I didn't need any of that. But it's sort of a safety jacket, if you like. I remember that thing of don't make any big decisions for 90 days. Now, there's some stuff that you do know immediately. And there's other stuff where you can't know. So actually, and it was a bit of a running joke in the all agency meetings. I'd turn up with a list of all the things I'd done each week, how many clients I'd had coffees with, how many people in the agency I'd spent time with, because that was the work. Actually, almost all my work in the first month or two was listening to people. I mean, there were plans to be built, of course. So maybe that's not quite true, but probably the majority of my time was spent listening to people. And I suppose I reflect now, and the truth of it is that I'm glad I did, because I found myself in an agency where people had all the answers. So I haven't really had to come up with any groundbreaking answers myself. We just needed to listen to people, and my job is to, as a leader, is to go, right, this is where we are now. This is where we want to get to. These are some of the barriers and the hurdles we've got to pass along the way, which all the people at AMV and our clients have told me. I've got to choose which of those things to listen to, and then shape the team and get us all lined up behind achieving those things. So yeah, I'd say it's a bit of a cliche, but like doing some hardcore proper listening, which is really difficult, by the way, because try and not say anything for, say, 3 minutes while someone's talking to you. It's almost impossible for me anyway, but I've sort of trained myself to kind of and then you can really, really hear things, and people really talk. But if you constantly interject, then you don't benefit from what people have really got to say.
We called it hijacking the conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, I've just been hijacked. There we go. And then they end up taking it somewhere that you didn't think anywhere. It's really the best thing that I did as a coach was learning just to sit in the silence. Because they say when you hijack, especially if you're coaching, you've got to wait for your client to get the answer themselves. And you just got to count in your head. And once you get to 10, you just count for another 5. And normally within that extra 5, they speak. And it's just getting so comfortable just to sit.
Exactly. Yeah. So yes, I did lots of, I listened a lot, and our clients were amazing as well. So mostly listen, and then, we hadn't done a formal survey of our, staff survey, for example, for many, many years in the agency. And that was, again, people from AMV watching this will laugh because they think I'm over obsessed with the staff survey, which I'm not.
You love a staff survey.
But we learned a lot from it. People really wanted to tell us stuff, and there were massive patterns and themes. So it's been really useful. But laying down some clear metrics, for what we want to achieve, and the things that matter in helping us get there, have been really, really important too. So I'd say listening, and then measurable objectives, and actually measuring stuff. We're not really good at measuring stuff that makes us the money in agencies.
Yep.
Look, a lot of agencies measure the money, but like, what's going to make you the money? It's much more important than the money. The money will come if you do certain things.
I would say if your people feel cared about, they'll care about the business. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Really curious, because it sounds like listening to it, it's really easy. We're just going to listen. We build a plan. We've got our bridge. We know where we're going. This is just, and then it flows. It's just wonderful. What are the bits in your leadership that you find really challenging? What are the bits you go, that's the bit that will keep me awake at night knowing I've got to do that tomorrow?
It's no secret. We've made quite a lot of people changes at AMV since I got there, and several of those are leadership changes, and that's really hard. I don't think I ever take it lightly when you're talking about having to change the shape of an agency and therefore the people who are in the agency. If you're having to tell some really talented people that there isn't a role for them, I find that I'll never find that easy. Now it's trite because of course the person who finds that hardest is the person it affects, but it makes me almost ill having to prepare for those conversations. But I think, again, maybe something I didn't mention before, it's all about decisions, and there were a lot that, in most of the organisations I've been in, you can almost spot the decisions that have not been made a mile off. The job is to work out what those decisions are that everyone knows need to happen and maybe should have been made years ago, but nobody had the courage to make those decisions. Because when you're running an organisation of, let's say 200-300 people, they're never binary. If it was all good and all upside and no downside, then nobody would have a problem. But in all those decisions, it's nuanced. There's loads of pros and there's loads of cons, and people paralyse themselves by not making any decision. So I think the hardest bit is to make the decisions and then follow them through and do the things. That's the hardest. The hardest bit is doing the things.
Action. Yeah.
And that's as true in a leadership role as it is anywhere else. And I think lots and lots and lots of people know what the things are, what the decisions are that need
Everyone
making.
knows. And they're all talking about
the
it.
people that are willing to make those decisions, I think, are fewer and further between. And some days I'm really good at making decisions, and some days I find it really hard. But I think the best thing to do is to acknowledge that the decision he's making, and then force yourself into a position where you've got to make it, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. So I think, embracing how difficult you know it's going to be, and then doing it anyway. So I think when how uncomfortable you feel gets in the way of you doing the thing, that's the problem. So I've got used to feeling really uncomfortable about things, but I know when that's because it just makes your gut wrench rather than because it's the wrong thing.
And if you don't do it, all you've done is made it about you. You made it about your uncomfortable versus actually what's right for the person to do. Also that, in an organisation, you have to prioritise the majority of people in the organisation. And you have to operate with compassion, but everybody can't always be happy necessarily. You just have to approach some of those more difficult, sometimes decisions that might appear ruthless, with as much compassion as you can in the moment, I guess. And I think, as you said, everyone does know what needs to be done. And then when it's not done, the risk is a lot of respect gets lost.
Yeah.
And people then just stop believing.
Yeah.
Actually, where can we really go if these decisions aren't getting done? So it's not, yes, it's impacting somebody really badly in that moment, but the ripple effect impact if the action isn't done can be huge. Something that I've lived by that helped me move through my uncomfortableness is I see it as somebody's bill of rights. If I know this role isn't right for this person anymore, or it's time for them to move on, which it happens to everybody, you can outgrow a place or be somewhere, I always say to myself, it's somebody's bill of rights for me to tell them where they stand and where they're at, because I never want to be someone who takes someone's rights away. And I just know if I put myself in that situation, I'd hate the idea of people talking about me thinking I'm not right, but not doing it for fear of upsetting me. And then I'm in a role that you can just feel it, that you're being spoken about. And I just would never do that to somebody.
I think that's just so on point with that, because I think, in our industry, there are lots of people talk about being nice and being kind, and particularly as culture's evolved in a positive way, it's become acceptable to be vulnerable, etc. Kindness is important, but I think it's not kind to someone to keep someone in the organisation, which means the organisation can't perform as well as it ought to. It's not kind to not tell people what you think of them, even if it means a difficult conversation, because if you're that person, you want to know. You don't want to not know, because then you can't do anything about it. That's actually unkind. So I think kind of understanding what kindness to a person really means, and really having their interests at heart, I think can enable us to put ourselves into uncomfortable positions more easily, maybe.
Yeah, and majority of these people go on to something so much better anyway, because deep down they probably knew it wasn't quite right for them to still be there anyway. So it does normally work out from the experience that I've had. Just a quick pause to ask for your help. We received wonderful messages on how the podcast is supporting you as leaders and helping to normalise the challenges you face. To help us reach and support more leaders, we'd love your help. If you haven't already, please can you follow or subscribe on the platforms you watch or listen to us on, as it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to the episode. Just, talking about slight shift, but in terms of what people go through, I know in your personal life you've had a lot of pain. How has that pain shaped you or changed you in terms of how you approach things now?
It's probably those different moments that have made me, it's uncomfortable to say it, but made me into the leader I am today. So because I very much grew up, thinking presenteeism was important. I would walk around the office as much as anybody else, seeing who was still there at 6:30, at 7:00 at night. Because I'd just been taught it was a learned behaviour. When I had to leave a pitch meeting to go and deal with a family emergency, and had to do that many times over a period of a few years, when work really isn't the most important thing, when it cannot be the most important thing, I was forced to become a different type of leader, actually to be a type of leader that I didn't know how to be, because all I knew was being there and leading by example. So what happens when you can't be there? And also, I sat there thinking, if I'm seen to be prioritising something else other than my job, particularly this is happening very early into my time at Havas, people aren't going to think I'm serious. They're going to think I'm not committed. But what actually happened was the opposite. People would come up to me and say, I heard about this moment where I'd done X or Y, I'd left this meeting, or I heard about the situation in your family, and it completely transformed what I thought my actions were resulting in. My actions were actually resulting in people being inspired that it was all right to have shit going on in life, and that it was all right to talk about it, and you could still do a good job in a senior role in our industry. And have shit going down, and prioritise it. Now again, it was a horrible, difficult. Sort of making what was a very difficult period sound really, really easy. But I didn't always get it right, and probably there were moments when I could have been somewhere with my family when I wasn't. There were moments when I should have been at work and I wasn't. But you're just making up as you go along. But I think that's all right. Sometimes there isn't a rule, but sometimes you've got no past experience to go on, and you just got to make decisions in a moment about what's best for you, your family, work, all of it. And sometimes you mess it up, but along the way, as long as you mean well,
you're trying to do the right thing
and try and do the right thing, then
has it changed you?
Yeah, because it's funny. I'm unembarrassed about my relatively privileged sort of start in life, or all of my life really. But so I was used to me happening to life. I was able to, I worked hard, and then I would manage to get a job I wanted, or a promotion, or all of these things. And then suddenly there's a moment where life happens to you, and you're not in control, and that does change you. You realise you aren't in control. None of us are in control. There's some stuff that's going to happen to us that we can't do anything about, and also you might think that stuff's bad, but it's not. It's just life. You might have previously judged people who ended up being in the same situations you end up in. So I think I learned a lot. I learned that life happens to us all, whether we like it or not. And for many years, that can go really well for you, and then suddenly it cannot. I learned that there's no right way of dealing with any of it. You just have to muddle through. But I do think it made me, I've always tried to be a really grounded, down-to-earth person, and my family helped me massively with that, all of them, fortunately. But I definitely sit here today versus where I was 10, 15 years ago, and I have a huge amount of respect for everybody, because you never know what's going on in people's lives. Everyone's got something going on. I think the mistake we make is that that's not the case. I had my stuff going on, but so is everybody else. And you don't know what it is. And woe betide you if you think you're better than anyone else, or that you've had bigger challenges than anyone else. Just not true.
I think when we all go through the stuff, my stuff was quite early, when I realised life happens to you, I think you become very empathetic. So I find as well, like with my team and stuff, it said when I see a mistake or something happen, I never jump to that. The first thing I'm is, are you okay? Help me understand what's going on for you right now. And I think if we can have that approach first, to be like, actually, this is quite unusual behaviour, or they don't see themselves, or they don't normally make these mistakes. Let's go beyond a fight and get curious versus just getting annoyed they haven't delivered something when they said they would. I think it just gives you that bit more compassionate and bring the whole human being into it versus the deliverable.
Totally. Without question. But actually, I think the most important thing is building a culture where people feel it's all right to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
I think there's so many organisations where people don't feel, it's not about permission, but safe. They don't feel safe talking about this stuff. They think, and this whole strength and weakness thing, I still think, it's all right being the CEO and talking about being vulnerable, but if you're making your way up through a business and you're having to talk about some stuff that's going to, might affect your performance right now in your role, it's scary, and you don't know whether to tell people or not. And I suppose all I would urge people to do is to create environments, cultures in their team where people can talk about that stuff. One of the things I can never remember whether I read it or what, but I feel like I read it. It said the bigger the gap between your public self and what's really going on in your life, that in that gap is where mental illness grows. And so I learned really quickly when I was going through a tough time, and I was not having I was lucky I was not having mental health issues, but I didn't want to have any. And I learned, I'd never really talked publicly about how I felt about things or what was going on in my life, but I learned if I didn't, I was going to get, I needed people to know what was going on. And whilst that was going to be, difficult because I didn't want to share some of the things that were going on, I knew it was it was the only thing that was going to enable me to protect myself through all this, and therefore it was the only thing that was going to enable me to look after my family while we were all having a difficult time. An environment where you can talk about some of that stuff going down. And I remember pressing send on an email where I told my boss and the key people in my team what was happening in my life. I decided I just have to tell people, because otherwise they're going to wonder what's going on, and also this gap I need to close. It was the feedback I got when people knew, they just wanted to help. So I think I would just encourage people to be more able to communicate what's really going on in their lives. But I would also encourage leaders, it's your job to create an environment where people feel safe to do that, and to not hold it against them, but to hold it in their favour.
Yeah, be with them.
Yeah,
see them. Yeah. So interesting, because you've been on quite a journey in your leadership, and especially with that happening. What do you think are some of the what would surprise people to know about you?
I don't know, not much. I don't know, like, sort of assumes people know me at all. Most people don't know. But I think one of the things that I've weirdly become a bit synonymous with is, business is a force for good, and we took Havas through to B Corp status, and I remain really passionate advocate of
both B Corps and as business as a force for good. But I'm not, I think people think I'm holier than thou sometimes, and I'm not. I've got lots of failings. I'm not that woke, although I see wokeness as a positive thing rather than like how some of the world is trying to portray it now. But weirdly, I think people are shocked when I've like been, that I eat so much McDonald's, or that I don't drive a purely electric car, or like all of this stuff. So I don't think that's not big surprising stuff, is it? But I think sometimes I worry I'm letting people down quite quickly. So they've got, they're imagining that I'm sort of a bit more woke than I am. So there's that. I don't know. I'm not that surprising a character.
You're not that surprising. Is that a bit surprising that you're just not surprising?
Yeah, really nice.
Look, thank you so much for everything you shared. With all of this, what advice would you pass to your younger self?
It's work out who you are, and be brilliant at that. That's so important. But then I would also say, don't avoid difficult situations or jobs or decisions or anything. Just they're never going to feel comfortable. They might make you feel sick, but just walk into those situations rather than away from them. If you do all those things and work hard, then I think, we talked once before, didn't we, about the role luck plays, because I think luck plays a big role in all of our lives and careers. So not all of my career, in fact, big chunks of my career have been about being in the right place at the right time. But in order to be in that right place at the right time, I had to have worked hard, got to know lots of people and built relationships, and be prepared to do difficult jobs that maybe other people didn't want to do. So I think, work out who you are and be that, because that's all you've got. You are who you are, and don't avoid deeply uncomfortable situations. Everybody finds these things horrifically, excruciatingly uncomfortable.
But that's when you know you're growing.
Yeah.
And it's those uncomfortable situations that's where you transform your life. Staying safe and staying comfortable, I suppose you just flatline, don't you? You just maybe not that dramatic.
It's not for me. Yeah, it's not for me. I think, life's most rewarding, I think, when you're experiencing new things, or when you're having to achieve things without much of a safety blanket. But it's also quite scary, and everybody's got different appetites for risk. So I think, there are amazing people, stalwarts who've done the same job for 25 years and done it brilliantly, and they're a critical part of every organisation of society. So I think we don't need life to be full of the world to be full of risk takers, and I don't necessarily see myself as a risk taker either. I sort of, in many ways, I'm averse to risk, but I think I am curious, and I like being in a situation where I've got to learn new things or not, or prove people wrong.
Yeah.
So but that's me. I don't think.
No, and I agree. But I think
right
fundamentally, if you're going to go into a leadership position, you need to have that bit of hunger to keep growing yourself, to show up, to get curious, because I think the people you're leading can only really grow as far as you're willing to grow yourself. So I think if you want to be in a leadership position, that hunger to keep growing and putting yourself in uncomfortable positions is the impact then you can have on others.
Yeah, and I think remaining uncertain about whether you can achieve the thing you're trying to achieve is probably another good bit of advice, actually, because I think the minute you think, oh, I can definitely do this, you put yourself into way too much of a comfortable position. I think, I worry about weirdly, the thing I worry about most is whether all the people within AMV think that I'm doing what I need to do to make the company they work at as brilliant as it can be. And then I worry about what our clients think all the time. So I spend a lot of time thinking, like in a slight state of anxiety about whether anybody thinks what I'm doing is enough. But I think that's important. The minute you're not nervous about that stuff, you get
a bit lazy, maybe.
Well, probably quite quickly you get your comeuppance, or at least I hope you do.
We'll finish on that one. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to reinforce or share, anything that we'd missed, that your final words that you want to do now?
just that this is an amazing industry still. And we didn't really talk about, well, it wasn't the time to talk about, but we work in an industry where we make things, which is massively rewarding. And I think humans like to do it. And technology can help us do that. And all of the, lots of conversation around all kinds of technology at the moment. I'll deliberately not mention the tough technology we know we're talking about. But I think be excited about what's possible in a creative agency. This is an exciting time to be alive, and I love getting up in the morning and coming and doing what we're doing.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for listening. And we'll see you next week. If you've been loving our Courageous Leaders podcast, please can I ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps keep the quality content coming and reach listeners like you that we can then really, really help. We fund this podcast ourselves, so to have your support means that we can keep delivering week on week. Thank you.